No. You do not need to spend your life wasting away checking your email every 5 seconds after you've applied to dental school. In this video, I'm gonna give you 3 things that you can do after you've finished your applications, you've sent them off, and now you're in that dreaded waiting period. Let's get into it. Okay, the white balance just changed drastically. Weird. First of all, congratulations. You've applied to dental school. You've sent all your documents off. Maybe you're waiting for interviews. Maybe you've already got some interviews scheduled. I'm sure that you want some other ways to spend your time productively. If you've never seen me before, hi, my name is Medina. I'm a D3 at Columbia. I still get questions all the time about what to do during this kind of awkward, stressful period. I thought that I would just tell you guys exactly what I did because I was in my gap year, so I literally had nothing to do. I found things to occupy my time so that I wasn't obsessively refreshing my inbox a million times a day. Tip number 1, if you are still in undergrad, you're applying without taking a gap year, this is the time where you get to finally take the classes that you didn't have time for. Maybe they're outside of your prerequisites, maybe they're even outside of your major. My biggest tip is that if you're still in undergrad, make room for those classes. During my senior year, even though I wasn't in the process of waiting for dental school interviews, I still wanted to make sure that I took classes that I really wanted to and that I enjoyed. Classes in literature, classes in philosophy and ethics, things that I found extremely interesting and fulfilling and helpful, but had nothing to do with my dental school prerequisites because I was done with those, I was over them. It was something that I learned within the broader humanities scope. It gave me something to think about in terms of patient encounter ethics and certain things that have to do with being a medical professional, and it gave me a different perspective on things that I wouldn't have thought about when I was taking my biochem and orgo courses, which was, I think, really helpful, and I actually was able to talk about it during my interviews. Okay, if you can hear some street noise in the background, I apologize. My windows are open. It is finally beautiful weather outside. Your main priority now is preparing for interviews. Completely get that, but the one thing that you want to make sure that you're doing, just because you've already sent off your application and you've already listed all your accomplishments and all your activities and everything that you've done in your undergrad career leading up to this moment, doesn't mean that you should all of a sudden stop doing those things. So I will give you some context. The reason why I decided to make this video was because I got a question from someone in my DMs asking if they're applying without any or without much volunteering, is that a deal breaker, and should they do something now that they've already sent off their application in order to have something in the realm of volunteering, even though they had a lot of other experiences, including shadowing and assisting. One, just because you've submitted your application doesn't mean that you should stop doing a lot of the activities that you have listed on your application. There is an academic update period where you can add additional things that you've done since applying to the end of the fall semester when you're applying to dental school. The other thing is, just because you have submitted your application, you've checked all the boxes, doesn't mean that you're not going to be asked, so what have you been up to lately since you've applied to dental school? If your answer is, oh, I don't know, or something along those lines, it's not gonna look good to whoever's interviewing you. You wanna make sure that if you said that you're incredibly passionate about service, loved working as a dental assistant, loved shadowing at so-and-so office or clinic, that you maybe continue doing that even after you apply to show your genuine interest in that. You shouldn't be doing a lot of these things just to check a box and say, hey, I did this. Although I know that sometimes that's the way it works out. Sometimes you only have time to do the minimum required amount. It's always good to have a story behind each activity that you're doing. So that's just a little bit of context on why I decided to make this video. Okay, so I've talked about what you can do if you're still an undergrad and you don't have a ton of free time. Now, if you are like me and you decided to take a gap year and you've applied to dental school and you're now in the process where you are no longer in school, you've sent off your dental school applications, your world might seem kind of empty right now. And that, first of all, is totally fine. It is okay to pump the brakes, slow down your life, take inventory of everything that you've accomplished, and chill for a second. Before the whole pandemic happened, my plan for my gap year was maybe working part-time, but using a majority of that year to travel, to explore, and to, for once in my life, relax, not worried about the next exam that I had to take, submitting documents for dental school, writing papers for undergrad classes. And it was the first time in my life where I was going to not have constant deadlines that I had to meet. So I thought, perfect, I'm gonna use this year to travel. That came to a screeching halt. But if I were to go back and it wasn't a COVID year, the world didn't go on lockdown, and I had the opportunity and the finances, I would absolutely do that. Because being an undergrad as a pre-dental, pre-med, pre-vet student student is extremely stressful. Being in dental school, especially in the first couple of years, is extremely stressful. You don't really want to go from being extremely stressed to being even more stressed. I like the idea of having a year of buffer where I would allow myself to, for once in my life, relax and not think about deadlines and not have to worry too much about the next thing that was coming around the corner. Like I've talked about in my interview tips video, my interviewers asked me mostly personal questions. They didn't really ask me about my dental experiences. They didn't ask me about my undergrad career because they had all of that on paper. What they wanted to know was who I was as a person, the things that brought me joy, the things that I was passionate about. If you are someone who has put their all into their academics in the 4 years that you were an undergrad and you really didn't leave yourself any room to relax and to explore and enjoy things that were in a non-academic setting, this is the perfect time to broaden your horizons, to have something else to talk about aside from the classes that you took, the exams that you scored well on. I was asked about my favorite books, places that I've traveled to, things that I've been doing on the weekends during my free time in my gap year. It was things that I really didn't prepare answers for, but it still felt very natural because there were obviously things that I could talk about. I talked at length about my favorite books, my favorite author, which was kind of funny because my interviewer for Columbia's daughter's favorite author was the same as mine, so we had a mutual connection there. But most of my questions were really not academically related at all. Things that I did in my spare time and in my gap year were really good conversational pieces that I used to show them who I am outside of an academic setting. That's really what the purpose of an interview is to gauge who you are as a person and will you mesh well within their academic community. So that is tip number 2. If you are in a gap year, make some time to travel, to explore. If you don't have the finances to travel, I totally get that. It is very expensive. Maybe take some weekend trips. Explore the city that you live in. I mean, I grew up in New York. There's a million museums. There's a million places that you can learn about the culture and the history of the city and the people of the city. There's free activities that you can do. You can go hiking, you go to parks, explore that way. You know, a lot of times friends of mine have bonded with their interviewers because they talked about their favorite hiking areas. They talked about beaches where they like to surf. So it's just activities like that that show that you are not just a person that is a studying machine. You have a life outside of your academics. And the last tip that I will give you is if you are like me and the only way that you will stay sane is by not sitting still, to get a job as a dental assistant. I think that this honestly saved me when I was applying to dental school. When I applied, it was 2020, the world had shut down, most offices had shut down, and all my plans that I had for my glorious gap year came to a screeching halt. However, offices were still operating for emergency procedures only, they were working with heavy PPE, they were still addressing patients' needs because there were still people that had dental infections, a lot of pain and required restorations, which was a bit of a trial by fire, but it was one of the most amazing learning opportunities that I could have done for myself for starting dental school. So during my gap year, because I couldn't travel, I got a full-time job working as a dental assistant. And although I had some experience because I had shadowed in the past, I had no idea the things that I didn't know. I very quickly learned them as soon as I started working as an assistant. The thing is, when you're shadowing, you kind of have to stand off to the side. You don't want to get in anybody's way. You don't often get a good enough view of anything that is being done in the procedure. You don't really get to know the names of the instruments or what the materials are called unless you hear the doctor directly say, "Can I have so-and-so?" When I started working as an assistant, not only was it an amazing learning opportunity because I got to know the steps of pretty much every single restorative procedure, the names of the instruments, the reason for the use of different dental materials in different situations. I got to ask questions and I was also very up close. I got to see surgical procedures like root canals, implants and extractions, such a variety of procedures. I even would sometimes study in my free time because I would hear the doctors say the name of an instrument, but I wouldn't know like how it's spelled, or if I were to look at, let's say, a maxillary and a mandibular extraction forceps, I wouldn't be able to tell the difference at first. I would open the instrument drawers and I would like look at them and I would ask some more seasoned assistants like, hey, this one's this, right? And this one's this. And I would use downtime at work to learn the names and the purpose of a lot of instruments that I wasn't seeing being as regularly used. It provided me with a basic knowledge in pretty much every single dental discipline that I learned about within my first and especially my second year of dental school. It set a foundation for my knowledge of a million dental procedures, and it gave me a huge leg up when it came to being more comfortable in my simulation lab classes, as well as my theoretical lecture classes, where I had to know the theory and the reasoning behind the steps of certain procedures or the use of certain materials. And because I was doing it full time, I was at the office from 9 to 7, 4 or 5 days a week sometimes, because we were so busy and because we were donned in layers of PPE. I'm talking gowns, N95, surgical mask, shield, everything, in order to actually reach for my phone, see my notifications, took layers and layers of work. So I really wasn't checking my phone that much, and the only times that I would check my email was during my lunch break or before or after work. So that was really only a couple of times a day where I was obsessing and waiting for my interview invites. But I definitely think that if I wasn't so busy and if I wasn't working full time, I would definitely have more time to be obsessive and be checking my email all the time. It wouldn't have been as good of a use for my time. Obviously, things are a little bit different. You're not going to be wearing layers and layers of PPE in private offices as much now. Things have quieted down a little bit, thank goodness, because working with the N95 gave me crazy acne. I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate to. But still, working full time during my gap year allowed me to focus on something else, be productive, because I felt like I was still learning a lot related to dentistry in my future career. And again, it was something that came up time and time again during my interviews, because they were asking, you know, what kind of office setting it was. I was actually very lucky because I worked in a general dentistry office that did a lot of interdisciplinary things. One of my interviewers was actually quite impressed. He was like, wow, that's really great, because it's rare that a general dentistry office is so well-rounded in the type of procedures that they do. And he even made a comment that that is kind of the trend in the future of general dentistry, is general dentists are wanting to do more. And I've even heard, if you say that you work as an assistant on your application, I didn't have this, but I've heard from certain schools, I'm not gonna name names, certain interviewers will ask you to just like list the steps of a restorative procedure or another type of procedure that you've said you've seen. So if you don't actually know the steps or you get kind of flustered, they'll know that your experience is maybe a little bit embellished. So if you do say that you've assisted, make sure that you kind of know what you're talking about in terms of the steps of certain procedures, because you never know, you might apply to a school where the interviewers will ask. Again, I didn't have that experience, but just something that I've heard from other people who have applied. So like I've said, even though it is totally okay to obsess over your inbox a little bit, and by the way, yes, make sure to check your spam and your junk, because sometimes magically interview invites will end up in there. I don't want to be the person who missed out on a dream opportunity because you didn't see the email. But if you want a break from obsessing over whether or not you've heard back from a certain school, these are the 3 things that we went over. So if you're still an undergrad, take the time to take classes that you enjoy, classes outside of your major, classes that have nothing to do with dental school, and things that just pique your interest you just didn't have room for in your rigorous academic schedule before. And if you're in a gap year, either use that time to relax, to travel, broaden your horizons a little bit, or use that time to fully delve into work and work full-time or part-time as a dental assistant. Broaden your skills, broaden your knowledge, get a leg up on learning a lot of the material that you're gonna learn in dental school anyway. Those are the tips that I have given anybody who has asked me in the past about what to do now that they've applied to dental school. And again, take a moment to congratulate yourself on everything that you've accomplished so far. It isn't easy. Honestly, you need to stop and give yourself credit for that. I know I was really bad at that, so I had people in my life who would tell me, hey, you actually accomplished a lot. It's maybe time to take inventory of everything and just appreciate the fact that you've even gotten this far. But if you're looking for something to do, those were my tips for you. Alrighty, I'm gonna run out of here because I actually have started studying for my boards. So if you want to see that, stick around, like this video, and hit the subscribe button to follow the rest of my dental school journey. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye. Camera testing, checking out this new face tracking. My makeup looks really glowy today.